Hi, it's Jo from Minerva. Today we're going to do a fitting video for a small bust adjustment. All of the techniques that I'm going to show you today are outlined in the Figure Your Fit book, which you can buy from our website. It's a 64-page booklet that gives you all of the top fitting issues and really simple instructions on how to alter your pattern with some simple layouts. Today I'm going to do a small bust adjustment on a non-darted bodice. That's a bodice without a dart, but you will need to find your bust apex. The pattern that I'm using is McCall's 7322. It's a really free and easy fitting top, but then if you don't get the fit right, it can look like it's just hanging off you because there's no other fitting features to it. It's got a round neck facing and facings on the armholes, and you'll be looking out for any signs of any drag lines that are coming from the shoulder down to your bust. You'll be getting these drag lines if you have a small bust, because a bust is filling this shoulder area of fabric, and if you don't have anything there, then these will hang down like this and you will get these drag lines coming down from your shoulder. Also, the overall feel of the whole top will be too big. Most Big 4 paper tissue patterns are fit for a B cup size, so if you're smaller than a B cup, you'll need to do a small bust adjustment. Some independent pattern companies and indie patterns will draft for a C cup, and some patterns may have different size pattern pieces for different cup sizes, so look out for those too. In order to measure your bust size for a bust adjustment, you need to measure your upper bust, which is above your bust line and round onto your back, so you'll get more of a fit of your shoulder and back and your overall 3D shape. So mine's 36 inches. And then you need to measure your full bust. Mine's 38. So I have a difference of 2 inches between my upper bust and my full bust. The difference between your upper bust and your full bust determines your cup size. So if there's 2-inch difference, that's a B. If there's 3-inch difference, that's a C. If there's 4-inch difference, that's a D, and so on. But of course, if you're making a small bust adjustment, if you've got a 1-inch difference, that's an A, and if you've got less than that, then you're an AA. So you'll need to maybe play around with your fit before you plump for the garment of your dreams and do a small bust adjustment on it. You need to play around with it a little bit, and once you've got your fit, you'll be able to apply that to other patterns. The next thing you need to do is to tissue fit your pattern. So if your pattern hasn't got darts, then you need to hold the pattern piece up with the center line running down your center, pin it to your clothes so it doesn't move around. Match your shoulder seam up with the shoulder seam. If the shoulder seam's too far back, you need to move it forward. If it's too far forward, you need to move it back so that it's at the top of your shoulder. And then you need to make a mark with a pencil where the fullest part of your bust is. That's really important because we're going to use that point to measure off all of our adjustments on a small bust adjustment. Once you've got that bust apex marking, we can go over to the cutting table and I can show you the mark lines for making the adjustment. This is the front piece from McCall's 7322. And this is the extra small, small and medium. And even when I go down to extra small, this top is still too big in the bust for my daughter who is wearing it. So the bust apex is actually in the right place, and that's how it's marked on a pattern, with a circle and a cross running through it. And we're going to use a ruler to make some key lines. The first one we're going to make is from the hem to the bust apex, running parallel to the center seam. So this is our first line. We're going to take a second line to the armhole, about 1/3 of the armhole. So imagine the armhole into thirds. It normally comes around the notch, but not always. And The last line is coming from the waistline. So here's the marking for the waistline. And I've put this in the right place by using the lengthen and shorten line. About 6 centimetres up from the waistline, it's not critical, but about that, you're going to take another line. So you've got one that moves but doesn't change the arm cycle. You've got one that we can close up the bust area, and we've got the one going down the centre line. Firstly, we're going to cut down the centre line. If you've taped your pattern together, then once you've made some cuts, you might need to be just putting a few bits back together. I like to use this surgical tape because it's really pliable for if you want to try the paper fit on again, and you can just tear it off with your fingers. The second cut is going to be this arm cycle one, and you need to mark the seam allowance because we're not going to cut through the seam allowance. We're going to cut to the seam allowance but not through it, and from the apex to the seam allowance but not through it. If you do cut through it, you can just pop a little bit of tape on. But what that does now is that means we can use that little paper hinge so that we can move that bust and armhole area, especially if we're getting drag lines here. We're going to be taking some out from this upper bust area. The next cut is this sort of imaginary dark line, and we keep that attached at the end with a tiny bit of paper so that we can hinge that as well. So now you can see that we can move all of these pieces independently of each other. If we're making a full bust adjustment, obviously we're going to be moving that space out, but because we're making a small bust adjustment, then we want this paper to overlap. I would like to take out 1 inch from the bust, so I'm going to make a mark that's 1/2 inch from the bust apex because this is on the fold, so I'll get 1/2 inch out of this bust point and 1/2 inch out of the other bust point, making 1 inch in total. So I'm going to move the paper half an inch away from the bust point. You might experiment here, you might need it here, you might need it further up, but just make one to get you started. And I'm going to keep this parallel, so I should have the same amount of paper running along here. And what it does is it makes an overlap here. So I've taken out some of the fullness in the side seam and around the bust area where a fuller bust would be. Just take that down, and it's taken a pinch out of here, so it's hard to see on a solid paper, so I'll show you what's been removed. So that shape has been removed from there, and that shape has been removed from there, and it's moved over 1/2 inch. So now I won't get the drag lines coming from shoulder down to here because I haven't got this fullness anymore. So I will have eliminated these drag lines here, and I will have eliminated all this sort of sagginess here in the armhole. I need to put this paper pattern piece back together. So I'm going to tape the upper bust down. I'm going to tape the side bust down, and you'll see that this needs truing back up. So you can do that with your ruler, pop a piece of paper underneath and true that seam back up. And you can see here now we've lost that waistline that we had, and that's because we've made the top shorter. So remember, when we make a full bust adjustment, our tops are too short, but when we have a small bust, our tops tend to be too long. So we need to move this up. So I would like to move this waistline back up to this waistline. It doesn't matter so much for this top because it's not got such a distinctive waistline, but just to show you, I would like that waistline to match back up again. Sometimes you can cut down here and move it up. Sometimes you can cut in the middle and move it up. I would like to just make sure that I know that if there is any shaping in that waistline from the ease on the side, I take advantage of it. So this is my new extra small. It's extra small with a small bust adjustment. I haven't changed the shape of the arm cyc. I need to true up that edge. The waistline is matching and it won't be too long. Other things that might help you with a small bust adjustment when you're doing your fitting is to play around with the shoulder seam. That can make a huge difference. It's often item 1 on a sewing pattern, so the shoulder seams move on, but actually that first shoulder seam can set the whole angle for whether you get a baggy neck, whether you get a baggy armhole, whether this slops off your shoulder. So be sure when you do that first seam for shoulder that you then try it on, because if you can make a shoulder adjustment, a sloping shoulder adjustment or a square shoulder adjustment, that can make a huge difference to the fit of your arm and your neck. Now that we've made those alterations on the front, how will that affect the back? Well, let's have a look at the back piece. So you'll need to make sure that whatever you did to the front won't affect adversely the back. It means the arm cyc is the same shape, and also the shoulder seams are the same shape. Being able to do an SBA is really useful if you're sewing for teens or you've got a very slim fit, because even if you go down to the smallest size on a pattern, like I've just demonstrated there, that was extra small, but it was still too big. Here's a picture of how it was too big. You can see there was drag lines coming down from the shoulders, and the overall fit around here was too large. So that pattern is an adult pattern, but for someone who's 15, 16, 17, 18 and is a slim fit, then if you could do an SBA, you can choose adult style garments without having the adult fullness that isn't fitting that body shape. It seems quite complicated, but once you've done it once or twice and you know that it's a common fitting adjustment for you, it will become second nature. Some people use an SBA even for a jersey stretch fabric and a casual top or sporty thing, because even if it's a jersey cut, just because it's stretchy doesn't mean it's suddenly going to have negative ease and fit a smaller frame. You might need to do a small bust adjustment on a non-darted body, for example on a t-shirt or a long sleeve tee, so you can still do those adjustments that I've just shown you on more casual items. I hope that's helped you and it's given you something to think about and something to experiment with. Come back soon for more fitting tutorials. In the meantime, go and visit minerva.com and have a look at our fabrics and check out that fitting book because it is really useful. Thanks very much for watching. See you again soon.